Today we're going to learn about acorns. Acorns are a nut or a fruit of an oak tree. There's 450 species of oak worldwide. They've been feeding humans and animals alike for millions of years. So today we're going to go through step by step on how to process them so that they're edible and you can eat them in your everyday cooking. So step one is you're going to want to gather your acorns. These acorns that we have here are red oak. That's just what's available here in Maine. This process that we're going to describe to you applies to all acorns. When you're gathering your acorns, you're just going to want to do a little quality check because not all acorns are going to be good. This one right here, the little hole, this is no good. This is an acorn weevil exit hole. Acorn weevil is a little tiny bug, a little beetle, that lays its eggs inside of acorns, and then its little larva will grow inside. And you see those little white pellets, that's all of its feces, that's its little poops. And that's no good. We don't want to eat acorn weevil poop. If you see an acorn with its cap still on, you don't want to gather that acorn. That was aborted by the tree. It's no good. The next thing you're going to want to check for is the disc. Here we have two different discs. This one right here, pretty good looking. I would definitely eat that one. This one, not so good. Maybe cast that one out. Don't stress yourself out too much about the quality. The really nice looking ones, the pretty ones, pick those ones, and don't pick the ones that are cracked or broken or look like they've been there for a few years. The next thing you're going to want to do is dry them out. You have to dry them, otherwise they'll mold. These ones right here are already dry, but the ones that you're gonna get are gonna be a lot more wet. We have this screen here that we put in front of our heater to help move the air around. So we'll just generally, you want them all to be in one single sheet. You don't want them to be all bunched up or on top of each other, otherwise they're not gonna dry properly. And if you don't have a screen or this kind of setup at home, you can also use a baking sheet or any other screen would work just fine too. The drying process takes about 2 weeks. And the way that you're gonna wanna test that is just to take a nutcracker or a mallet or a hammer, a rock, that's fine too. And you're just gonna wanna try and crack it open. If it has that nice dry crack to it, they're good to go. If you go to crack them and they're kind of squishy, then they're not ready yet and you're just gonna wanna let them dry out for a few days longer. After you dry them, you can store them for 10 years or more. You are just gonna wanna make sure that you store them in a rodent-proof box. So you don't attract them. So one of the things you're gonna wanna keep an eye out for, you know, earlier we were talking about the acorn weevils. Well, some of them are still in the shell and they haven't exited yet. While they're drying, the little acorn weevils are gonna wiggle out. They're actually a pretty excellent source of protein. You can just pick them up and eat them, or you can fry them up, or you can free them, whatever you feel is the most appropriate way to deal with the acorn weevils, but be on the lookout for them. So now we get to crack all the acorns. You can use a nutcracker. See the acorn right there? That's what we want. You could also use a rock. If you want to put a little more money into this, you can spend $150 and get this Dave built mechanism. It's a nutcracker. If you don't want to spend $150, but you want a little more bulk out of it, you can use just a 5-gallon bucket, and then on the bottom here we just have a solid piece of wood. Otherwise you'll hurt the bucket, and I'm just gonna... Good way to get some aggression out. We just shelled, we cracked a bunch of nuts. As you can see in here, we have this lovely mixed pile of shell and nuts. And you might be asking yourself, how do you get all the shell and nuts separated from each other? Well, there's a really simple method you can use. So I filled my 5-gallon bucket up, and up here, floating to the top, are all of our shells. Just kind of agitate it a little bit. All shell right here. So you don't have to necessarily use the water method if you have a small amount of acorns at home. This is really best for large quantities. But if you do use this method, just keep in mind that it's not infallible. You're not gonna get every single shell out of here. Within these acorns are still some shell. You're going to have to dump out all this water, and then you are gonna have to re-dry the acorns. You can do this in the oven, you can do this out in the sun, you can use, like we were showing earlier, with the screen, with the heater. Then you're going to hand pick out the shell. So the acorns are dry. Again, we've put them on this screen. This is a really helpful tool to have. Roll it around, kind of agitate the shells off. And it also removes the testa. Testa is this outer little husk. It's between the shell and the acorn. You don't have to really necessarily worry about getting all the testa. There's a lot of opportunity to get testa out. In short, you're gonna remove the shells and you're gonna remove any ugly acorns. Good way to really hone in on your quality check is just to take little handfuls. Once you get most of the big shells out, just take out little handfuls here. And then you're just gonna go through each little bit. This looks good. But here we have another shell. So you definitely double, triple, quadruple check. Make sure that you're only putting away clean acorns. This is exactly what we're looking for, just pure acorn. Now we're gonna move on to the next step, which is leaching. So leaching is the process of removing tannic acid from the acorns. Tannic acid is an anti-nutrient, so it's not really good for you, so you definitely want to get that out of the acorn. There's two different ways to leach. Hot leach, cold leach. Hot leach is when you take hot water to leach out or remove the tannic acid. So here we have a bunch of our acorns in this pot. We're getting ready for it to boil. There's no hard and fast rules with boiling tannic acid out. You have to change the water out a few times for the next couple hours. I would say about 4 or 5 hours in, start testing your nuts out. And once the acorns don't taste bitter anymore, that's when they're done. Hot leach is good for whole nuts. If you want to do an acorn flour for baking, then I recommend doing a cold leach. You have to first grind it down to a flour, a very fine flour. You can use a blender, or you can also use a mortar and pestle, or you can use a hand crank grinder. We're gonna show you our blender here. I put these on. You can see it's very fine. Making it this fine increases the surface area, so you have more potential to get as much of the tannic acid out. We use a gallon jar, and then we fill it up only to about a quarter of the way full. And then we're gonna fill the rest of it with water. You wanna make sure that you get every bit of the flour completely saturated. And now we're gonna stick this in the fridge overnight, and then we're gonna come back to it tomorrow. So it's the next morning, and our flour has been sitting overnight in the water. Now you can see that I'm handling this very gently, very slowly, very carefully, because we don't want to disrupt all the flour that's settled to the bottom here. You can see up here is where all of our tannin-rich water, all of this tannic acid was pulled from our flour. And on top here is some of that testa that we were pulling out yesterday while we were shelling. So more of that came out, which is great because we'll be able to pour that off with all of this water. So the water is actually pretty useful. It's got some medicinal qualities with it for the tannic acid. We aren't gonna use this, so we're just going to pour it down the sink. This is about where I stopped. Once you start seeing more siltiness coming in the water as you're pouring it out, then I would stop about there. You're gonna fill this back up. And then same thing, you wanna agitate it. Then we're gonna do the process again. It's gonna pull more of that tannic acid. This process, it can take a week, it can take 2 weeks. About a week, week and a half in is when you're gonna wanna physically taste the flour, and you're never gonna get the water to be completely clear. It's never gonna be 100% crystal clear. So what you're aiming for is when you're tasting the flour, it's just not gonna have a bitter taste. Once you remove that bitter taste, the flour's good to go. The flour is edible. You can eat it wet, pretty good in porridge. You can use it right away for baking. If you do want to keep it for long-term storage though, you do have to dry it out. You can easily put it on a sheet, just make sure you spread it out really thin. You can also do it right in the oven, just set it at the lowest possible temperature, just enough to get it warm and dry until it has like this kind of powdery consistency again. This is not good to just put on your shelf with the regular flour. This is a nut flour, so you definitely want to either stick it in your refrigerator or your freezer to keep it from going bad. So this video was really just about making the acorns edible to eat. We didn't go into how to bake with them or cook with them. But we encourage you to go and figure out what you want to use this for. We don't want to tell you what to do. We want you to go do that. Humans have been eating acorns for thousands of years. We've been making jellies, we've been making pudding, we've done cakes, we've done candied acorns, we do muffins. The possibilities are endless. Just remember that it's a gift from the earth and it's super nutritious. Thanks for watching and good luck!